All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling something huge, a theory that doesn't just poke at what we know about the mind, but suggests the mind is what reality is actually made of. Seriously, this one is going to stretch your brain a bit, so buckle up.
Everything really boils down to this one simple question, right? Consciousness is the most familiar thing in the world to us. I mean, it's this feeling of being here right now. And yet, it's the one giant mystery that science just keeps slamming into a wall trying to explain. How does all this stuff feel like anything at all? So, for the longest time, the debate's been split. You've got the classic materialist view on one side. The brain is just a super complicated computer, and consciousness is basically a byproduct, like the heat coming off your laptop. But on the other side, our source material asks a wild question. What if we've got it completely backward? What if consciousness isn't something that matter makes, but matter is something that happens inside of consciousness? To really wrap our heads around this, we're going to take it step by step. First, we'll look at the big problem this theory is trying to solve. Then, we'll introduce the core idea itself, this consciousness field. After that, we'll explore what this all means for you, your identity. Then we'll get into the really mind-bending stuff, and finally, ask what the purpose of the whole shebang might be. Okay, first up, the great question. This is really the paradox that kicks this whole theory into motion. Look, we've gotten incredibly good at mapping the how of the brain. We can watch neurons fire, we can track the chemicals, but none of that explains the why. Why does a certain wavelength of light create the subjective feeling of seeing the color red? Why do vibrations in the air become the emotional experience of music? Science can describe the mechanics, but it can't seem to cross that bridge from the physical process to the inner feeling. And this is where the theory we're looking at today proposes a solution by basically flipping the entire board over. So the theory proposes something new and fundamental to reality, the psi field, or psi field. Think of it like the electromagnetic field, which is the foundation for light and magnetism. This psi field is a universal field of pure, raw awareness. It's not in the universe. The idea is that the universe is happening within it. It's the medium for all existence. And just like other fields have particles, the psi field has the psi particle. Now, the theory calls this the soul, but I want you to think of it in a scientific way, not a religious one. It's just a little, stable packet of awareness, a tiny piece of that big field. It's the fundamental unit that does the experiencing. It's the thing that feels. And this leads to a complete flip in how we see the brain. In this model, consciousness isn't created by the brain. It's already out there, everywhere, in the field. The brain is just an incredibly complex antenna that tunes into it, anchoring one of those psi particles and focusing that universal awareness into the specific experience you call me. Okay, so that raises a pretty big question. If the soul is just this raw, blank awareness, then what is all this? What's my personality, my memories, my fears, my hopes? What is the me that I feel like? Well, this theory makes a really sharp distinction between the soul and the self. The soul, that psi particle, is the timeless blank canvas. It's just the pure ability to experience anything. The self, on the other hand, the ego, that's the painting that gets created on the canvas. It's a temporary pattern built from all your memories, your beliefs, your habits, everything you've ever learned. And there's a brilliant analogy for this in the source material. It says the self is like a whirlpool in a river. You know, a whirlpool looks like a stable, distinct thing, but it's actually made of constantly changing water flowing through it. In the same way, your self feels stable, but it's just a persistent pattern in a constant flow of information and energy. You're not a thing, you're a process. All right, so now that we have these core ideas, the field, the particle, and the self, let's start exploring the consequences. And this is where things get really, really wild. This theory doesn't shy away from the biggest question of them all. If the brain is just the antenna, what happens when that antenna breaks? According to this idea, death isn't the end of awareness. It's just the end of a localized awareness. When the brain shuts down and the pattern dissolves, the psi particle is simply released from the antenna. It delocalizes. It returns to the bigger consciousness field. It's like a single wave that was traveling across the ocean, finally dissolving back into the water it came from. Okay, so the awareness goes back to the field. But what about our experiences, our memories? Does that wave take anything with it when it goes back to the ocean? So here's another twist. The source material suggests memory isn't like a file stored on a hard drive in your brain. It's more like an informational pattern that the soul becomes entangled with. So even after death, the soul can still resonate with those patterns, kind of like how a tuning fork will start to vibrate if you play its specific note nearby. This could be a way to think about things like deep intuition or even what people describe as past life memories. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most profound part of this whole idea. If reality is a field of consciousness that creates all these individual experiences, what's the point of it all? Well, the theory proposes that consciousness isn't an on-off switch. It's a spectrum. A rock, for instance, has a very, very slow and simple pattern of being. It's like a deep, low, persistent hum of existence. A human, on the other hand, has an incredibly fast, complex, and self-reflecting pattern. It's not that one is more conscious than the other, they're just different expressions of the very same underlying field. When you look at it this way, you start to see this clear direction, this arrow of awareness moving toward more and more complexity. And the proposal here is that the entire history of the cosmos, from the Big Bang all the way to you sitting here watching this, is the universe's grand strategy for getting to know itself. And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. Your individual consciousness isn't some random biological accident. In this view, it's a necessary and absolutely vital part of a cosmic project. Every feeling you have, every joy, every sorrow, every insight, that's the universe experiencing one of its infinite possibilities through you. And to leave you with one final thought from the source material, a thought that completely reframes our place in the cosmos, you are not some small, lonely thing in a vast, empty universe. You are the universe. You are the point where the great void awakens, learns how to look back at itself, and smiles.